Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this episode, I'm delighted to interview Gordon van Wechel. For more than 17 years, Gordon's business, the Alchemy Consulting Group, has been helping hundreds of small to medium-sized businesses and professional practices develop marketing and business growth plans that have brought millions of dollars in added revenue. In 1995, Gordon began partnering with several NGOs to teach micro-enterprise principles to people in underdeveloped nations. This work has taken him to more than 50 countries, resulting in the launch of more than 1,000 businesses, 27 schools, and many community development programs. Gordon believes an enduring lesson from these experiences is the importance of business growth that is both consistent and predictable. And to achieve this, business and professional practice owners must be aware of market trends and be able to pivot quickly towards new opportunities in order to survive. In addition to focusing on growth, Gordon also works with owners to enhance the value of their businesses. He believes that even if selling the business isn't a goal, every entrepreneur should analyze their enterprise as if they were a buyer. And today, this is the area that I wish to delve into. So without further delay, I welcome Gordon onto the podcast. Hello, Gordon. How are you doing?
I'm well, Dave. Nice to see you.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining me tonight. I'll just forewarn the listeners that the UK is being hit by a storm at the moment, so hopefully there won't be any disruption in our audio quality. Anyway, it's quite clear, Gordon, that certainly from the introduction I gave, that you have a considerable business knowledge and experience to fall back on. Would you be so kind as to take a few minutes to share with the listeners a little on your academic and professional journey to lead you to where you are today?
Sure. Followed the usual path of people in our age group. Went to college, also went to grad school. And then when I finished, I took a job in corporate America. That lasted about 2.5 years before they finally got tired of listening to me tell them how they should run their corporation. And I got fired. Well, that turned out to be a great blessing in my life because I've never had to have a corporate job since. I met a couple of guys and we started a chain of restaurants and eventually sold it to one of the big national companies. Got into the computer business very early on, the computer software development business, and we built a company and sold that. And then I started a mortgage and real estate practice and wound up building a company into 38 states and sold that. So those are my successes, Dave. As you well know, in any entrepreneurial journey, there's going to be some failures along the way as well, and I've had some of those. But I started Alchemy in 2003, really because I realized that the same strategies that I had used to grow my businesses over the years would really help a local business or a new business starting out who couldn't afford to write a big $10,000 or $12,000 check to a traditional ad agency. So I built this company specifically to work with those small to medium-sized businesses and help them grow and meet their capacity and help their owners achieve whatever it was that they wanted to do when they started their business.
Okay, that's really good. So let's think of a business value. One tends to think of establishing a business's value by a calculated purchase price. Often, I think this is considered to be a factor of EBITDA, such as between, let's say, 2 and 4 times that kind of number. And in this context of an enterprise's value, how do you see the value actually being created or calculated in your way of thinking?
Well, let me answer that first by saying that most business owners don't realize how difficult it is to sell a business. In fact, here in the U.S., just under 90% of the businesses that are offered for sale do not sell. So just a small fraction of the businesses do sell. And I think part of that is because as business owners, we tend to value our businesses based on the revenue that we've produced. And whether that's top line revenue or EBITDA, as you suggest, different industries have different formulas that are typical for calculating. But most of us as owners look in the rearview mirror. You know, we're justifiably proud of the things that we've done, the business we've created, the people we've developed, our client list. But a business acquirer, whether that's an individual or a larger company, Honestly, they don't care what we've done. What they're looking at is what's the future cash flow? What kind of ROI are they going to get? And you can rest assured that they're going to discount that over time as they evaluate your business. So the challenge for a business owner is to prepare their business for sale by having it look as best as possible to that acquiring company. And that's a very different skill set than growing your business.
So we think of the monetary value of one's company could be considered the most important measure of an entrepreneur's success. I'm interested to know if you think just a financial value is the sort of sole or most important measure. And if not, what other factors do you see as important to consider in evaluation?
Great question. And it really leads into what we do with the Value Builder system. When an acquirer is looking at a business as a potential investment, there's a couple of major things they're looking for. Is there any recurring revenue in that business? And recurring revenue is not repeat customers. Recurring revenue is contractual customers that are paying every month or every quarter and have a long-term relationship with the company that's going to extend into the future even after a sale. So recurring revenue is a really important criteria, and it will definitely enhance the value of an enterprise if a business owner can create that. Another value criteria that an acquiring company is looking at is how intimately involved is the owner in everyday decision-making. Now, for a small business, of course, most of us as owners are involved in as many of the decisions that go on during the day as you can imagine. But that's a negative in the eye of an acquirer. The way that we calculate that is we have a value tool that we call hub and spoke. And the number that we're looking at is 15%. That is, we want to know if the business owner knows more than 15% of their customers on a first name basis. We want to know if more than 15% of the value of the dependence of the work in that company is dependent on one team member, or if more than 15% of their raw material purchases are with one vendor. All of those are red flags to an acquiring company, particularly the amount of time the owner spends involved in making every decision. And we call that hub and spoke because a lot of entrepreneurs are very proud of the fact that they are that hub, that everything that's going on in their company revolves around them. But unless an acquirer is looking to buy a job, that's not a valuable thing for them. They're looking at an investment, not a job in most cases. So we want to try to help our owners separate themselves from as much of that day-to-day decision-making, all of those things that are important aspects of the business running through the owner's hands every week. We want to separate them as much as possible as we work with a company to prepare it for sale.
Yeah. Otherwise, I guess the business is the person as opposed to the other way around. So, yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the Value Builder system, and that's something I'm quite keen to investigate more. And that system, I believe, generates a business score. So,
yes.
So could you provide an overview first of what this system is before we dig into some of the 12 modules in the process?
Well, the Value Builder score is a metric that we have developed based on working with 65,000 different companies in North America, Australia, the UK, over the last 12 years. And what we've determined is that there are 8 value drivers that really determine what a company is worth in the eyes of an acquirer. 2 of those I've already talked about, recurring revenue and hub and spoke. But when we start with a company, the first thing that we want to do is have that owner go through the Value Builder survey, which is free. You can find it on our website. And what that does is it provides a basic score for where the company is at today with each one of those 8 value drivers. And that score is from 0 to 100. Now, our goal is to get a business to 80 or higher on as many of those as we possibly can. Now, the average score for a business when they first do the survey runs about 50 to 52 across the board. So they might have some of the 8 drivers at 20, they might have some at 80, but the average score is right about the midpoint, that 50th percentile. So then our task as we work with that business owner is to focus on those value drivers that we can move that lever up towards 80 or 90 as quickly as possible. In most cases, for a smaller company, you're not going to be able to get all of them up there. But if we can drive that overall score up as close to 80 as possible, what we find is the offers that are made to those companies are substantially higher. And let me try to quantify that for you. A company that has not gone through the program that typically would score in that 50 to 52 percentile, just generally speaking across all business niches, is going to get an offer that's 3.1 times revenue. If we can take that company up to 80 on our scale, that's going to jump to over 6 times revenue. And if we can get them above 90, it's going to go to over 7 times revenue. Now, again, that's a broad generalization, Dave, because as we said earlier, some business niches, EBITDA is what's important. Others, it's revenue, and others, it's retained earnings. But as a general rule, we find that companies who go through the program and are able to raise their value builder score to that 80th percentile achieve a much better offer when the time comes to sell.
So it's got huge value, obviously, to a company. It's an
Yes.
enormous return. Just interested you, some of the countries you did the survey on the 65,000 companies. Did you notice any differences from country to country? Do you think, let's say, other countries would have a different slant on those factors or not?
The 8 criteria, the 8 value builders are pretty universal, Dave. Somebody who's looking to invest in a business has essentially the same guidelines, whether they're in the UK or Kansas here in the United States. They're looking for that return on investment. They're looking for how passive that investment might be. They're hoping that the majority of the staff will stay on. All of those things are what go into that business decision. And that's pretty much universal.
Okay. Just interested to see if there's a cultural impact to this in any way, shape or form. But okay. Okay, let's look at some of the modules. Obviously, we don't have time to review all 12. I'm sure it'd be fascinating to do so, but we'll be here forever.
Let me clarify that. There's
Sure.
actually 8 value drivers. When we work with a client, it's normally a 12-month engagement because there's a couple of months that we spend doing operational value evaluation of their business and really helping that business owner identify where we can have the greatest impact quickly. And then we spend a month each on the various value drivers. And the total engagement is generally 12 months. About 45% of our clients will re-engage and continue for another 12 months just to continue to enhance the growth in each of those areas. So we actually have 2 different ways that a business owner can work with us. One is that longer term 12-month or more engagement, where we really do a deep dive into each one of the value drivers. Typically, that means we're meeting with the business owner 2 or maybe 3 times a month. Oftentimes, those are on Zoom because we work with companies all across the country. But that's a time commitment every month on the part of the business owner of somewhere in the 6 to 8 hours a month range, because there's some homework that they do and then the face-to-face meetings. And the reason we have those face-to-face meetings is, as facilitators of the program, we really work with that business owner and hold them accountable for the things that they're doing to change their company in response to that particular value driver. The alternative is a much shorter engagement, more of a mastermind approach that's only 10 weeks. And that's a group. It's a group that's limited to 8 business owners. Typically, they're from different niches, different types of businesses. So there's some wonderful synergy between the members as we have a weekly meeting. The difference is, while we meet each week and while we discuss each of the value drivers, it's up to the business owner to do the work themselves. There's no accountability program built into that. What we find frequently is, as a result of the mastermind, a business owner will identify 2 or 3 of the value drivers where they really need some help, and they'll engage one of our consultants on a short-term basis to work on those. But those are the 2 different ways that we engage with business owners, the full 12-month or the mastermind, and we run those about 3 times a year.
Okay. So they also, on the second option, build a kind of mini network as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Which probably could be pretty helpful because you'll see perspectives from different companies that you wouldn't necessarily apply to your own, I guess.
You do, but it's amazing how much transference there is between business niches when you really stop and think about it. So, I love facilitating the masterminds just because of that engagement and the synergy. By the time we get to the third week, those business owners are really engaging with each other. Frequently, they're meeting outside of the group. We've had multiple experiences where business owners decide, hey, let's partner up on something, or they'll start a new venture, or we've had people buy each other's companies out and merge. And so it's fun to watch those teams develop.
Excellent. That's good. That's great. Okay, let's look at a few of the modules. I picked a few out that I think might be of most interest at the moment, but I could find some things interesting in every one. But there we go. Let's just start from the beginning, where your benchmark where a business is at. And so you must peel back some key parameters and look for certain things that are most relevant. How do you assess those values? What are those values, and how do you assess them to the kind of depth that you need to make something very clear to you of where a business is at?
Well, just like a CPA, we want to meet with that business owner and really peel back the financials. We want to look at that balance sheet. We want to look at their income statements over the previous year. We want to have a clear understanding of what their goals for the business are. Keep in mind, most of the business owners we work with are not actively engaged in selling their enterprise, nor are they thinking about doing so for a couple of years. Honestly, if somebody came to me and said, gee, Gordon, I'd like to sell my business before the end of the year, I would probably not put them in this program. There are other things that we can do, but this is more of a medium to longer term, let's really set your business up for the future kind of program. And we'll frequently work with business owners that feel they have probably 10 more years before they want to retire, but they want to make sure their business is growing. The other thing that we find as we develop internal processes to enhance the results on these 8 value drivers is that business owner is able to spend more time away from the business. Most of us as entrepreneurs are probably averaging 60 hours a week in our business on a good week. But what we find is as you develop your team and you start to separate yourself from some of that day-to-day decision-making that we talked about earlier with the hub and spoke driver, you're able to spend a little more time away from the business. Maybe that's because you're developing people on your team to take over one day. A lot of our owners will sell to their management team. In other cases, they were developing those people and they're just taking some time off, working 40 hours a week instead. So when we first engage, those are the kinds of things we're looking at. Where are you at now? Where would you like to be? What's your 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goal for your business? Not only financially, but in terms of your quality of life. Who are the key players in your business today? How can we make sure you retain them so that you can spend less time running your business? So it's much more of a consultative approach in those first couple of meetings. And a lot of that comes from the Value Builder score, which is the first thing we ask a person to take, is to go through that exercise. It takes about 20 minutes. And we actually derive about a 25-page report that goes into a lot of detail with suggestions on what a business owner can do. There's no obligation when you do that assessment. That's a freebie. That's our foot in the door, if you will. A lot of times business owners will engage, but others, I'm not ready to engage. And, then we just start sharing information with them over time.
Yeah. Interesting how accurate you find that self-assessment, if you want to call that. I'm just thinking now that if we go to the doctor, for example, and he asks us how much alcohol do you drink a week, then you're telling him what? Yeah, probably a different number to that he would expect. So do you find that sometimes the owners have some kind of rose-colored glasses on and you have to actually, make them be a little bit more honest?
It's a great insight, Dave. Yes, we do find that, particularly in a couple of them, growth potential. The value driver of growth potential, most business owners will overestimate what their growth potential is. They'll underestimate how much fluctuation there is in their cash flow, the valuation teeter-totter, we call it. Frequently, they'll confuse recurring revenue with repeat customers. So that first assessment oftentimes has a little margin of error in it. But what it really does is raise the awareness on the part of the business owner that, these are things that I'm not thinking about as I run my business day to day. And that slowly evolving mental transformation towards how an acquiring company might view their business is really important. So, I'm always flexible with that initial score, recognizing that as the owner comes to terms with some of the realities of their business, we're going to see that change over time.
Perfect. So one of the key things I guess all businesses must have is an understanding of what the customer is to them. And module 3, I believe, concerns capturing the voice of the customer.
Yes, customer score, we call it.
Yeah. So what's the best ways of doing this effectively? And what are the main outputs that you're seeking in this?
Well, interestingly enough, we encourage our owners, and we'll set it up and we'll do it for them independently. So from the perspective of their customers, it is an independent firm doing it. We ask a single question. We do a single question survey. And that's counterintuitive because most businesses want to get 10 or 12 questions out there and really get a broad stroke. We're only looking for one. And this is actually based on research that a man named Fred Wechel did back in the 50s or 60s here in the US. And what he was trying to do was come up with a metric that really determined long-term value of a business, not short-term answers to immediate questions. So we ask one question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this company to a friend or colleague? That's the only thing we ask. Now, occasionally we'll have a business owner that insists we ask a second question. And that second question is, why did you choose that number? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this company to a friend or colleague? And then it's real simple. We just track the scores. So people who score 9 to 10, we would categorize as promoters. 7 to 8 are passive, and 0 to 6 are detractors. So to get the score, you want to take the number of promoters, the 9s and 10s, and subtract the number of detractors. So let me give you a simple example. We use 100. We take 100 surveys. 25% of those people are promoters. They're the raving fans, the 9 or 10s. 70% are passive, and 5% are detractors. So 25 minus 5 is a net promoter score of 20. Now, the average net promoter score across all businesses is between 10 and 15. But what this tells a buyer is a really clear insight into the future stream of income for the company. If that net promoter score is anything above 15, that means that there's a lot of repeat customers out there. There's a lot of raving fans, that are going to bring in new customers. And what we've seen is several examples here in the US of companies that have gotten that net promoter score up really high, 30, 40, 50, and the multiples that they're able to sell for, or the valuation of their businesses when they go into the financial markets is incredibly high based on their current income. So net promoter score is really an important one. That's a good insight, Dave, that you picked that one, because that's one that we actually do 2 different times during the year, once early on in the process, and then once as we get towards the end of the process.
Okay. Just interested, those kind of businesses, let's say you had a legal company, and so people only tend to go to ask for legal services when there's a problem. Mm-hmm. So how would they, for example, determine, repeat customers? One would like to think they're not criminals. They're constantly going back for repeat business. So in those cases where there isn't, we should say, often a repeat, how does it work then?
Well, what we do in those cases is we help that business owner, whether it's a professional practice like an attorney or, a lot of companies in the building trades, let's say a roofing contractor, people don't need a roof every year.
Absolutely, yes.
So what we really help them foster is an environment of seeking referrals and turning those satisfied clients, those satisfied customers into raving fans. And there's a variety of strategies that we can help a business owner implement to do that. That kind of flips over to the other side of our company, the Alchemy Consulting side, our marketing business. But the synergy between the two is really helpful to a business owner as we're working through the value builder engagement.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that's a good insight because there are a lot of businesses that don't have what you would think is repeat business.
Yeah.
But you can get the equivalent of repeat business by having those raving fans. And when you start to attribute business they bring back to their original transaction, now suddenly you're multiplying that transaction value.
Great. Okay, that's much clearer. Thank you for that. So the next module, I touched on micromanagement, because that's often a place where an entrepreneur can sort of go down a rabbit hole, perhaps. And module 7 talks about breaking away from day-to-day operations. So can you explain some more on how this can be achieved and perhaps draw out a few notable experiences you can share on this subject?
You know, the process of developing key people is integral to being able to accomplish this for a business owner, and introducing them to the concept of having what we call an A team, and really evaluating the strength of the people they have in each position in their organization. And again, for a lot of the clients that we work with, they're relatively small companies. They might have 15 to 20 employees, and maybe they're doing, $3 to $7 million a year, depending upon their niche. But we're not talking about major players, big national or regional companies. So for them, being able to implement a system that really enhances the strength of their team and starts to move towards all new hires are potential A players, and the onboarding process for those people really separates very quickly whether they're going to be A players, and doing the same kind of evaluation with the team they have in place. So a big part of it is just developing your team. But there's a psychological dimension as well, Dave, because most of us as business owners, well, we have a big ego to begin with, or we wouldn't have started our own company. But it's hard to think that that company can exist as well without us being there all the time as it can with us being there all the time. And that's a myth. And in most cases, that's a myth. But we need to help the business owners come to the understanding that the long-term benefit to their enterprise is enhanced if they can step back a little bit. If nothing else, there's a great book that I would recommend to your audience. It's called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. Successful entrepreneur, has built several companies, went through one of the big economic crises and lost everything and had to start over. But one of the key points in his book is that as an owner, we need to be able to step away, turn off all of our appliances. And, he's old school. He says, sit there with a legal pad and just think. And if you can do that for at least a half a day a week, you're going to come up with so many great ideas to help grow your business that are not necessarily dependent on you. And you don't want them to be dependent on you. So we try to build that mindset in our clients that says, hey, it's okay for you to take a little time off and enjoy your family. You don't need to miss every one of your kids' soccer games. And you really want to spend some time, some serious time blocks, 90, 120-minute time blocks, really thinking about your business. And not only your business, but think about yourself, your life. What's the quality of life you're really looking for? Most of us got into business because we thought it was going to enhance our quality of life. And it was only after getting into the weeds, as much as most of us do, that we realized that, maybe what we've really done is created a really difficult job for ourselves. So helping them step back from that and in the process, gain a better quality of life, but also enhance the value of their company in the eyes of a potential acquirer.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Now, Module 8, you touch on the Switzerland structure to strengthen the foundation of a company. Can you briefly describe how this risk mitigation system is applied?
We base this on the idea that Switzerland has never participated in any of the wars that the rest of the world always seems to be involved in. They maintain neutrality. And so what we want that business to be is somewhat neutral when it comes to dependence on a single vendor, a single employee, or a single customer. And the number we use is 15%. I think I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, 15, yeah.
And I'll give you a perfect example. My late brother-in-law worked for a company that supplied parts to General Motors. And one year, General Motors went to the president of his company and says, we really like your work. We love your parts. Here's what we're willing to pay for them next year. Take it or leave it.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So the company was faced with a crisis. Do we let 20% of our staff go, or does everybody go to a 4-day work week so we all stay employed? And in that case, he let the company vote and they agreed that they should all stay employed. But, that's a 20% hit to everybody's income. So being dependent on a single customer is not a good situation to be in as an entrepreneur. Likewise, being dependent on a single employee can create problems as well if that employee leaves, or if that employee recognizes their value to the enterprise and holds you up for more money than perhaps they're worth. And the same with a vendor. We see this a lot in the construction trades. A contractor will get really ingratiated with a single supplier. And, then all of a sudden the supplier has business difficulties, or the supplier raises their prices, or there's a transition in the supplier. They sell their business and the new owner may not have the same affection for the business owner that we're working with. So you really want to help them understand that sharing the wealth, making sure you've got responsibilities shared across your entire staff, that you're working with multiple vendors, and that you're really developing a broad base of customers is what we're trying to do with the Switzerland structure.
Yeah, I guess the younger the business, the higher the risk as well, because they haven't had the time to diversify, develop the people with greater skills, and strengthen depth across a broader framework, should we say? So yeah, understand that, and certainly understand from the supplier point of view. If you've got one source of anything, then you're probably in a bit of trouble. The slightest hiccup, and you'll suffer.
Yes.
So absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'll jump to the last module, keeping an eye on the time, the 12th module. And in that you refer to an envelope test. Can you explain what an envelope test is?
Yes. Early in the process, as we've helped the business owner create awareness of where they would like to go and the reality of where they want to go within the timeline that they want to accomplish it, we ask them to write down the number that they would find to be acceptable if they were to sell their company. And again, a lot of the people we work with aren't ready to sell or aren't thinking about that just yet. But we ask them to write down that number and put it in an envelope and tuck it away somewhere. And then when the time comes that they do go to market, we want to remind them of what that number is. So we have them look at it. And oftentimes the number is going to be lower than what their ultimate offer is, in part because they've gone through the process of developing the value in their company. On the other hand, we see times where people get to the point where they're ready to sell and they feel because they've done all this work, their business is worth more than the market is willing to give them. One of the things that it's important a business owner understands is selling a business is not like selling a residential property. You don't go to the title company, sign the paperwork, get handed a check and walk away and you're done. You're just waiting for the movers to come the next day. Most business sales require some level of earnout on the part of the selling owner. And that earnout might be stay on as a consultant for some period of time. It might be you're going to continue to run the business for the next 2 years, but we're going to make some changes. And unfortunately, in many cases, a percentage of the owner's net walk-away money is contingent on success during that earnout time period. So back to the envelope test, when an owner is considering offers, oftentimes they'll go back to that envelope and realize that what was once a great number actually is still a great number, even though their business might be worth more if they can achieve that number without an earnout. The holy grail, if you will, for a business owner is to get a really good value, a good price for their company based on all the work they've done, but not to have to deal with an earnout.
Yeah, I guess perhaps one caveat for all of this, as in the value, is quite dependent on the market value, should we say, of the sector that perhaps a business is within. Because I guess if things are particularly on vogue, there's a huge trend towards whatever this area is. Let's say there's a huge growth in the building program, for example, then business is booming, and so therefore the value of that company at that particular time could be quite some factor higher than perhaps the person initially thought of when it was a little bit quieter, and equally vice versa.
We see that right now here in the US in SaaS companies, software as a service companies. We're seeing amazing multiples for those companies, multiples that to me don't make any sense, but typically they're acquired by a large company who wants to take that technology and merge it with something they have, or that particular technology will be appealing to a sector of their current customers. So it's worth it to them to buy and control that technology. But that's a niche right now that we're seeing really inflated multiples. Yeah.
Okay. Before I ask a closing question, where would the listeners find out more about you, your business, and the services that you can offer to people?
Well, we've been talking a lot about the Value Builder system, and they can go to alchemytransitions.com, ALCHEMY, alchemytransitions.com, and learn more about the services that are involved in our Value Builder program. And they can also click on the link and get a free value builder test and take that, and we'll put together the report and email it to them. So that'll give them kind of a benchmark for where they're at today.
Fantastic. Okay, one of the things that has occurred to me is that just going through this process, it's an excellent example of not only evaluating a business as a specific moment in time, but I see it also as being applied to the business on a recurring basis. Evaluating the direction of a business is traveling in and reassessing the future strategy, perhaps, so you can accelerate the business performance of value even more. So is this something that you see a number of your clients applying on a cyclical basis every 2 or 3 years? Or what's your experience of keeping applying this methodology to their business?
Yeah, I think one of the real values of the program is the level of education that we're able to provide to our business owners. And frequently, exactly what you're saying, Dave, 3-4 years later, they'll come back and say, okay, I need to go through this again. Or a company that we might have worked with 7 or 8 years ago, now the owner is in a position where he's thinking more seriously, or she's thinking more seriously about, I think I'm ready to sell. And they want to go back through the program again. Maybe not the full year, but let's do an abbreviated program and just see where we're at and see some tweaks that we can make before we start talking to business brokers.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the educational component, but there's also the let's fine tune one last time before we go to market.
Yeah. Just curious, is there a particular example business that you could share about where they started their journey? Obviously not naming any names, but saying, okay, I come across a business that was at this level, and after a 12-month program, they transformed and morphed into this. Is there anything you could share on an example that perhaps has recently occurred with yourselves?
Well, I can share 2 of those. One would be a professional practice, a CPA firm. Owner came to us and said that she would like to sell the firm in 3 years. What can we do to help her maximize that? And so we've gone through about 3/4 of the program now. Between her daughter's wedding and tax season, we weren't able to work as consistently as we had hoped, but we're still slowly and steadily moving forward. But just in the first year of working the program, we were able to see an increase in her top line revenue of 25%. And she has now been able to pass off a lot of what she used to do to a couple of her key managers, and has also created a new department and put a manager in charge of that department that takes even more of a load off of her. Would she have been able to do that on her own? I would say probably not. The firm's more than 20 years old, so those practices are hard to change.
Yeah.
But, I think as we continue to build out the program over the next 18 months, she'll see a continuing growth in the company and increasing the value. A second example would be a small manufacturer doing a little over $3 million a year with a couple of very specific products that are used by several different customer niches. A lot of the products are manufactured in China. So his challenge this year has been the tremendous increase in shipping costs.
Absolutely, yes, definitely.
I was with him last week, and he was saying that his containers a year and a half ago were $3,500 to ship, and they're $21,000 now.
Yeah.
But what we've seen in the time that he's been in the program, which is a little bit over a year, is again an increase from $3 million to just under $4 million in sales, a development of a couple of his key people. And as we go out and survey their customers, it's clear that while there are several competing products in the marketplace, his customers feel that his has a far superior value, even though it's not the cheapest in the marketplace. He's about 2 years away from wanting to sell. He's a man in his early 70s, so he'd like to be done before he's 75.
Yeah.
And I think we're well on the way to being able to do that.
That's fantastic. Well, I've certainly found this program extremely interesting. I think people should definitely at least have a look at the website and look at the modules that are there, because I think it's got tremendous value for any business, to be honest.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
That's really good. So obviously, see the time now. We've been on for nearly 45 minutes. Thank you very much for sharing this information. I think it's tremendous value to people, as I said, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's been great chatting with you, and I hope we brought good value to your audience.
Thank you very much. Take care, Gordon.
See you soon.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.